Hi everyone, this is day 11 of the 42-day revision challenge, and today we are doing maximum price. So what is the maximum price? Well, we say maximum price is a form of a price control, and we put a maximum price, or government puts a maximum price when they believe that the price of the good is too high. A good example of this could be the housing market in a city. So, for example, if in a city like New York, where the demand for houses is too high and the supply is limited, the government can decide to put a maximum price if they believe that the price is too high. Now, when they put a maximum price, they will put a maximum price below equilibrium, because the equilibrium price, which results from the market forces of demand and supply, can be too high. So, when you put a maximum price below equilibrium, clearly people will be able to get the apartments at a lower rent, but there are other implications of it which we want to discuss. So the biggest reason why we want to put a maximum price is because we want to make the poor consumers better off by making a good affordable. And it's normally seen in a market of necessities. So necessities are those goods which are important for our survival, such as housing, such as education, such as food, and putting a maximum price could be a good option to make it affordable for poor consumers, or for all consumers for that matter. So let's see this in a diagram and see how maximum price affects the equilibrium, market price, and quantity. Let's assume this is the demand and supply for housing in a city, and currently equilibrium price is P naught, and at P naught, Q naught people are renting apartments. So if the price is too high, and if the government feels the need to lower it, they can put a maximum price. The maximum price is put below equilibrium, so let's put a maximum price below equilibrium like P max. Let's call it P max. Maximum price. Now, when you put a maximum price below equilibrium like P max, it is good news for a lot of consumers who otherwise are unable to rent apartment in the city, and they will be encouraged. So quantities demanded will now go to Q2. But because the rent is lower than the rent that was on offer before the maximum price, the producers will now be discouraged. So some producers may decide to not rent their apartment anymore, resulting in Q1 apartments to be supplied by the producer. As a result of this, you can see this, that there are more consumers who are now willing to demand the good, and there are less producers now willing to supply the good, causing a shortage of Q2 minus Q1. So one of the biggest impact that we'll see of maximum price is that there will be what we call a shortage. Now this shortage means that only Q1 is supplied, and therefore only Q1 consumers are able to get the good, which means that first thing we need to understand is this, that when you put a maximum price, not all consumers will be able to get the good. Some consumers will be denied of the good. In fact, consumers Q0 minus Q1 are those consumers who are denied of the good. So I'm writing consumers denied of the good. Why are they denied of the good? Because now the quantity supplied has gone down from Q0 to Q1. Q2 minus Q0 are also those consumers who are denied of the good, but right now we're not considering them because they were the ones who did not get the good before the maximum price and also are not getting it now. So more important concern is of those consumers like Q0 minus Q1 who were getting the good but are denied of the good. So therefore maximum price only benefit Q1 consumers. So next thing that I want to look at is what's the consumer surplus and producer surplus before and after. And what I would want to do is actually take a line all the way up to this point A and call this price to be P max. And I'm going to talk about this in a little while as to what we mean by this. But let's look at consumer surplus and producer surplus before and after the maximum price to see what is happening to our consumer welfare. So before maximum price, let me write this, before maximum price, my consumer surplus is all the area under the demand curve above the market price P naught. So I can call this 1, 2 and 3. Let me zoom on the area. This consumer surplus will be 1, 2 and 3, which is all the area under the demand curve above the market price P naught. So consumer surplus will be area 1 plus 2 plus 3. And producer surplus will now be area 4 plus 5 plus 6. So when the price was P naught, area under the market price above the supply curve will be 4, 5 and 6. So producer surplus will be 4 plus 5 plus 6. And let me write this, price is P naught before maximum price and quantity is Q naught. Right? Now after maximum price, we notice that maximum price, your price is now P max, while the quantity that is being sold is Q1. So when you put a maximum price, only Q1 consumers are getting the good. So what is important to see is just that only this part of my demand curve is being met. The rest of the demand curve is kind of like not valid for us because these consumers are not getting the good. So for these guys, Q1 guys who are getting the good, they're getting the good at P max. So all the area under the demand curve above P max will be the consumer surplus. So consumer surplus will be 1 plus 2 plus 5. So let me repeat this, that any for these consumers Q1, area under the demand curve above the market price will be 1, 2 and 5. So these consumers are benefiting in terms of this consumer surplus of 1, 2 and 5. In terms of producer surplus, because only Q1 is being sold, so area under the Pmax price above the supply curve is equal to area 6. So are the consumers Q1 better off? And the answer is yes, because previously they were paying a price of P naught and now they're paying a price of P max. These guys previously was pocketing consumer surplus of 1 and 2, which they still are pocketing, but now area 5 is what we call additional consumer surplus because the price has gone down. So are the consumers better off? And the answer is yes. Those consumers who are lucky to get the good are better off in terms of lower prices. So lower prices is leading to higher consumer surplus for some, in our case, Q1 consumers. But are all consumers better off? And the answer is no. Some consumers like Q0 minus Q1 consumers are denied of the good, and therefore for consumer surplus for Q0 minus Q1 consumer is 0. So one important question that comes in exam is this, that is maximum price beneficial for all consumers? And the answer is no, it is not. Only those consumers who are lucky to get the good will have a higher consumer surplus, but those who are denied of the good will have 0 consumer surplus. Is it beneficial for producers? And the answer is no, not at all, because producer surplus is definitely going down from 4 plus 5 plus 6 to only area 6, as some producers are not producing or not renting out the apartment anymore. The next discussion we want to have in terms of maximum price is this, that what are the ways to eliminate our shortages when there are maximum prices. We know there's a shortage of Q2 minus Q1. If there's some way we could sort of eliminate the shortage, we are able to sort of minimize the problem of the maximum price. I mean, the idea behind the maximum price is good. We want to make the good affordable. So is there some way that we could sort of eliminate the shortage that can make the maximum price a successful policy? So what are the ways that we can go about it? Well, one way is to look at is this, that when we have only Q1 consumers to give the good, who are those Q1 consumers? And the answer is we can actually, first of all, ration the good Q1 in a manner which could be either first come first serve, or we could give it in terms of um, to the most needy. Like if you have a big family, you can give the apartments to those big family first, or we could basically give it in a manner where we could sort of have a quota of sorts, where we could say that like those families which are probably with kids will get an apartment. For example, in London, if you are somebody with family, you are more likely to get the apartment from the government than if you are, for example, single, or for example, without a family, or without kids for that matter. So let's look at two ways the government tackles the problem of the shortage. One is they do that by increasing supply, and B, they do that by decreasing demand. Increasing supply would mean something like this to happen. Like if this is your supply curve S, if I make my supply curve to be like here, something like here, if the supply curve go to the right and come here, automatically P max becomes my market price. So by increasing supply, the government can basically, like this, supply can go up and the government can actually make the price go down. How can we increase supply? Well, we could increase supply by many methods. Number one, the government could, for example, undertake provision themselves. Start producing the good themselves, like in terms of apartment, have government housing schemes. Number two, they could give subsidies. By giving subsidies, cost of production goes down, and that can result in the supply to go up. And they could also sometimes reduce taxes on producers, or they could have a stock of apartments available, and they could just give them out from their own stock. So draw on stock. In terms of decreasing demand, that's also one option. When the government decides to decrease demand, the demand curve may shift to the left, something like this. The demand curve may shift to the left, and by lowering this demand to D dash, what the government can do is basically make the equilibrium price to become P max. But how can we lower the demand for housing? I mean, housing is such an essential good. Why would people reduce demand? And the answer is, we can reduce the demand of, let's say, housing demand in New York by providing other alternatives. So to provide substitutes is another way of decreasing demand. So provide substitutes. What do we mean by substitutes? For example, what New York did was that they started providing housing options in Brooklyn and in New Jersey and in other places by improving their transport structure, so people could live in other parts of the cities, or other cities for that matter, and they could travel to New York during day because of better transport. So providing substitute is a way to reduce demand. That's one way to go about it. Another method could be, make housing cheaper elsewhere, so that the demand automatically goes down for housing in New York. So provide substitutes which are also cheaper in price. If the government is unable to solve the shortage that results from maximum price, then one problem that may arise is that of black market. What is black market? Well, black market is where, for example, some landlords and even tenants may illegally somehow get the apartments or rent the apartments through under the table or sort of secret payments, and that may cause basically the market price to actually be much more higher than P naught, as some sort of tenants who are denied of the good can pay a much higher price and get the apartments. And that is also seen that whenever the government is unable to sort of solve the problem of shortage, there could be these secret sort of illegal or hidden markets that can come about where the good can be sold at a higher price. So if that happens, then there will be a serious problem, because then the whole purpose of maximum price will be defeated, as those who get the good will then illegally give it to those who do not get the good at a much higher price. So to conclude, maximum price is a price that is put below equilibrium. It helps the consumers, but only those who are lucky to get the good, while those who are denied of the good will not get the good and therefore have a zero consumer surplus. While producers definitely suffer when it comes to maximum price, only some consumers who get the good will benefit. If you really want to solve the problem of a price to be too high, maybe one way to go about it is that we can give a subsidy or do something or the other that make the good cheaper, so that all consumers are able to benefit from the good. Otherwise, maximum price distorts the market for demand supply, and as a result, shortages come about.